We've forgotten even some of his legislators who were in the 1984, but you want to compensate them. At least they should be getting, and I think it's one of in the dailies today. So I fail to understand why the 13th Parliament can find that particular nerve and temerity to actually revive this particular bill. And we have beautiful bills that were put on the floor of ours, even by Mheshimiwa Sako, on how we can manage our public debts. Yet on pension, that is very pivotal for them. What are you reading in this? When this is the pension bill, Amendment Bill 2022.
Yeah. You know, Parliament, like in every country, US, Kenya, everywhere, there's things that are done on the basis of the lobby of the interest groups. And I think in the case of this pension bill, for those
the parliamentary pension,
the parliamentary pension bill, Parliament who served in those years, there's been a lot of lobby for the last 10, 15 years. They've been there. Every time you go to Parliament, you see former members of Parliament.
Yes.
Out there.
I remember that issue with the Ed and Canaan as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lobbying the members of Parliament to have that bill, because the argument is that, look, during our days, MPs were not
pensionable.
They were, even if they were pensionable, they were not being paid this kind of money.
Or they were not.
So the pension that they're getting, relative to what other MPs are getting today, is extremely low. And so they want to also, government is a cash cow for everyone, so everyone wants to have his pie. Yeah, so they by the way, even the local authority, I remember the county council, the councillors who served in those years also have a similar thing that they've been pushing for a while. So it's because of that lobby of all former members of Parliament who are always there, who are pushing for this thing, and then they're talking to their colleagues. So it's a kith and kin thing. So there's a former members of Parliament lobbying with the current members of Parliament to do something about their terms. So that's why. But other bills now, unless someone has an interest, unless now Mheshimiwa here now lobbies, talks to one of the other members of Parliament to try and revive his bill, those bills will die. Yeah.
Don't you find it very interesting, Kiprono Kitoni, if you walk back maybe to your first employer and say, this is the current state of play that we can see in the market as far as the pension is concerned. Yeah, can you just go back and try and give us the current market rate? I mean, that is ridiculous.
Naban, for me, it's just, and first of all, let me thank Bilo. Because Bilo told me, don't go for politics. And every time we meet here, I tell him, Bilo, thank you so much. You gave me the right and told me that it's not the right thing to do. But, for those who offer themselves, I mean, some people have to, and it's good for the country, but I think we all can serve our nation in different capacities. But I think, for me, what bothers me is we have a self-serving mentality and attitude in the leadership cadre. And you see, Parliament really controls the purse strings of the country. The national economy, the national budgets are passed through Parliament. And it's at that level that a lot of these conversations take place that are actually detrimental to the economic well-being of our country. You asked a question earlier on about a recession, whether or not we are in a recession. And, in the textbook, the definition of a recession is a reduction of economic activity over 2 quarters. I don't know how many quarters we've had a reduction of economic activity. And how does that manifest itself? It manifests itself through falling output, through layoffs of people working, through the reduction of purchase of homes and vehicles. And that's a reality of what's been happening in our country. It is a negative balance of trade that Professor spoke about at the beginning of this show. So all these symptoms are manifesting themselves in our country. Are we dealing with the problem holistically, or are we doing a knee-jerk reaction? Whenever there is a crisis, we deal with it. Like now, it's a dollar crisis. Let's look at the dollar. How are we going to deal with the dollar? What about the people who've been laid off, who don't have jobs? What about the issue of delayed payments by government and the consequential impact it has on enterprise? Yeah. How about the overregulation of business, which is a natural consequence of the new constitution? Because you know that the new constitution brought in 2 levels of government. There is the national government and there is the county governments, all of which have legislative arms. They have to legislate something. So over the years, they've come up with a myriad number of legislations that are restrictive to business. So you go to the small towns today to run a small, and I've said this many times on your show, to run a small hospitality outlet like I do in Kitale, I need 17 compliances. So if I'm employing 40 people or 50, why should I have a compliance officer working for me? Simply just to make sure that I'm complying with the noise rules, music copyright, NEMA, VAT and KRA. You know, we are literally, I think in my own opinion, as a country, we are shooting ourselves.
And that is a one-off service.
That is why I have been advocating that the way we can deal with this problem, including even the problem of the retired members of parliament going to parliament every day for lunch with their colleagues so they could ask for their pension to be put in the budget. And I'm sure it's very easy for them because they control the budget. They can easily just put in a figure there, and before you know it, we are paying a couple of 100 million shillings. But at the same time, we are not exporting, we're not feeding ourselves enough. Why is our balance of trade 800 billion shillings every year in the red? Why are we exporting less to Uganda? And why is the agricultural produce cheaper in Uganda, yet the inputs are coming from overland through our country into Uganda, and then they can go and process the either manufacture or even produce agriculturally, and we export to Kenya at a profit. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's madness. So these are the kind of things, hard conversations we need to have. And for me, honestly, I think the beginning of solving our economic problems is the ability of our nation to feed itself. Let us start there. So right now, we are in a situation where there's a food crisis, there's drought, we are importing basics, even like maize. We have all this land. We've never done anything with our agricultural practice. The farming practice in the bread basket districts are as they were. And it's very unfortunate, but even the past regime, I mean, in 10 years, we never had the head of state even visit our bread basket county. Not once.
Yeah.
Never stepped there. So how are we going to solve our food problem if we don't deal with agriculture? Let's start there. Let's feed ourselves. Then now we deal with it incrementally. But I think for me, let us not identify one problem and do a knee-jerk reaction. Let us look at this thing holistically. Let's identify what the top 10 problems are. What are the solutions to those problems? We move to the phase 2. Systematically, we will find ourselves out of the hole. Yeah.
All right, so mixed priorities is what we are actually facing, even with the new legislators who are coming in. If you look at what is on the front page of the Star, how governors spent billions on wrong priorities, MCAs are raking in sitting allowances, local revenue is low, development ignored while salaries and allowances skyrocket. Still, I think this falls smack dab in the middle of, your table, Mwenyezi Sakwa, 1984, 2001, unafaa kuwa umejipanga. Yeah. Kama, why should we be looking at your fares since then? Yeah. I think that is totally. And we're looking at over 400 million shillings that will be spent.
That could come out of this.
Yeah.
I think Bill Keller would answer this better than me. He was there before me. He should look at this. That's a light touch. But let me say, the fundamental questions to resolve. When is a pension payable? I think it's only in the parliamentary context and also in this service, the executive now, that a single 5-year term virtually adds you in parliament 2 terms, but when it is short service adds you a lifelong pension. Those are issues to be looked at holistically, not just for parliament, but holistically. It doesn't happen in other
jurisdictions.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in other. And every time there is a transition in government, it's going to be an activity of around pensioning, the exiting executive from the president to a certain number, certain layer. And they get really over generous packs, you get a home built for you, you get, I don't know how many vehicles you'll get, and you get lots of money that you're going to have. I mean, maybe that's the cost of smooth transitions that we need to bear, and so on. But again, I think when governors are, when wrong priorities are funded in the way that has been suggested here, broadly by anybody in the system, you can't micromanage and make sure that money doesn't go here, it goes there. You can manage the aggregates, as it were. When they are squeezed, they'll choose properly. They'll choose better, not properly. So they choose better. And as you know, even the transfers to the devolved government constitute about 400 billion. a year, everything put together, which is probably about 10%, under 10%, maybe 15% of the budget, a bit higher for the budget. But I think the key thing is the misuse that might be occurring in it, both nationally and at developed systems. And I think we should, clamp down on graft and so on, and let priorities be selected by the managers of the system that we have put in place. Some counties are going to grow faster than others. Each time I step in Tanzania, his home county, which is a breadbasket for this country, you look at the condition of roads and you say, hey, can it really? Except for one or two main roads that have tarmac, the rest of them are impossible when it rains. And this is why we rely on getting our food to move and get into the rail and get into the trucks and so on. I had not noticed the fact that the president had not focused on issues like this in the breadbasket counties. He needs to, because that's really how we shall be able to stabilize our economy. Our industrialization will come from agricultural surpluses that we grow. The economics is fairly rudimentary. And now it gives us to a point now where we can do other things there. Maize, which rots, if we could industrialize and do something else with it, but you can't do that if you can't manage a surplus. Each year there is a surplus, you have great crisis. So I really think from bad pension policies, and I think these have to be looked at. I have served 2 terms, and I'm going to get some pension. All I can say is that this pension can barely go beyond, petrol needs in a month, and maybe 1 or 2 other things. It's not a big deal, but it totals up to money an economy can barely carry. And these are issues that we really must confront squarely. We don't get a chance at any level in this economy, in this country, to discuss these kinds of things holistically. They get too personalized after a short time, after a short discussion. But I think we must confront them. What is it we can afford? What can we truly afford as an economy?
Right. And Dr. McPhee, this is not only just for the legislators. Remember also in 2021 we had the governors who also were proposing a bill so that they can actually get compensation after they're away from office. Despite the fact that you actually come in for the shortest term, 5 years, but you want to be compensated for life after you've done your service for 5 years. And this was the Council of Governors that developed the bill that proposes, it says here, the establishment of a pension scheme for top county government officers. It was drafted by the County Assemblies Forum in consultation with the current Attorney General, Kihara Kariuki. And if approved, it says that governors, their deputies, speakers of county assemblies and MCAs will be put on pension like the National Assembly and the Senate counterparts. And the bill MCAs will qualify for pension for serving 2 consecutive terms. Most governors are serving their second and final term in office. And so they're pushing even this year, before they leave office, that this should be effected as well. What is your proposal? Then they were saying, us and the president, we are on an even keel. So all the perks that the president gets, because we are sort of chiefdoms in our terrains, in our counties, we are treated like presidents, so we should get the same treatment.
I feel that this is a problem that we have to go back to August 2010, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Kenya to solve this problem. What do I mean by that? I remember before we voted on our new constitution, I was in a seminar at the Norfolk Hotel paid by one of our donors who are always trying to shaft Kenya because they don't want it to go up. Because, for example, Kenyan engineers are taking over in Tesla, for example, and so on. But anyway, the position here, is that we were attending a conference, and it was all about the new constitution. It was given by one of the committee of experts. And Kwame Owino said, he said something which I feel, I can still hear those words in my ears. How do we pay for all of this? Because we're increasing our parliament by 50%.
Yes.
We're putting in a Senate, which if the US Senate was commensurately large as ours, they would have 500 people as opposed to 100. We are putting in 47 counties. I had a friend, Gatimu, in Treasury, who said, look, turn the provinces into counties. No, mjinga wewe, enda. So the position is, we then put in each county as a governor. You've got the members of the county assembly. We have 2,500 people of those. Now the argument was, if we go into this system, we're going to employ more people. But we're employing more people in a job which produces almost nothing. Mm-hmm. To become an MCA, you don't even need to have, KCPE. So the position here, is that we now have a system which I remember at the time there was a lady, I forget her name just at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but a very, very clever young woman. She and I went to Denmark, and the Danish people were saying, look, don't have so many counties. We did something similar in Denmark, and then we actually started merging counties together. You'll never be able to do that in Kenya. Never. Simply because the people who are benefiting from that system will block it. So this is one of the reasons why when Martha Karua was against BBI, she's a past student, and I contacted her, I said, Martha, you are in fact doing something beneficial to Kenya. We don't need this BBI. We don't need more legislators. What do? We had a bill passed 22 years ago, the Donde bill. Mm-hmm. That was not even read by the members of parliament before they voted on it. Whenever a new bill comes out, the bills are put into the pigeonholes in parliament, and the fellow says, okay, well, this looks okay, Looks okay. They haven't read the details of this. This is their job. They're not doing the job, and we're paying them enormous amounts of money. Mm-hmm. But the whole parliamentary system, when I was doing my PhD, they opened a parliament in Scotland, and they fixed their salaries, £2,000 a month. The first thing those people did, before they passed any bills or anything, was to increase it to £4,000 a month. This is the nature of Parliament. If you go to Washington, D.C., the people in the Congress, the people in the Senate, they're millionaires. Because there's this lobby and that lobby and the other lobby and the other lobby. So, to my mind, you see, David Some up in Eldoret has actually got the 10 clans of the Kalenjin to work together. And they've solved many of their problems. That is the system of government that we have to go back to in Kenya. This thing of Western democracy is taboo.
David Some is the professor?
Yeah.
Professor Some.
Well, David Some, he used to be the head of
CE.
Yeah. So okay. The point is, what I feel is that, this whole thing, we've been imposed on. This is something which they run in the UK. Many of the members of parliament in the UK are corrupt. They have it in the United States. Many of those people are corrupt. The BBC is constantly saying, well, there's an election in Brazil there, and Mr. De Silva is going to be the new president, and, Bolsonaro is going to be out because he's a right-wing person. To my mind, I think we've got to get away from it. Now, the problem is, how do you undo this? How do you undo it, to my mind? And that is a fundamental problem which, let's face it, our new president is a doer. Let's hope he does something for Kenya in this area, because I feel that he can solve this problem. I had dinner in 2017 with an MP in India, in Hyderabad. He represents 2.5 million people. If we had that number of MPs in Kenya, we'd have 20.
I think this is a really interesting conversation, and for me, I just say, unless and until we are ready to face hold the bull by the horns, we are going to be going nowhere. And, if we look at, the sheer, as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, I visited 43 of the 47 counties in Kenya. And honestly, that I couldn't agree with Professor McPhee more. What we did in August of 2010, and unless we open up that conversation, we are really going to be going around in circles. Yeah, because, and when you discuss with the political class, they tell you that the horse has bolted and cannot be, we've rolled out the carpet, we cannot roll it back. South Africa has a GDP of $302 billion. Kenya has less than a third of that GDP. We have 47 counties. We have 8 in South Africa.
Provinces.
8 provinces in South Africa that are run autonomous provinces in South Africa. So if if you look at the sheer number of the sheer cost of our recurrent overhead here, then now the carry over of it, I mean that Mheshimiwa here talked about, and the pensions that come with it, it's a very big problem. But I would like to narrow down to 3 issues that I think really must be addressed as a matter of
Before you
urgency.
narrow down, just to maybe latch on that issue that you're talking about, the provinces in South Africa, we used to be there before, and with the current Council of Governors, they've realized that we can integrate, our regions, and we have the regional blocks. I think there has been a debate on whether we should go the regional blocks way, because we've discovered, we can use our competitive edge, to trade with one another, become a bloc, and the debate was, and just as you're saying, you have bugbears and fears that now if we integrate into regional blocks, then
That's a story for another day.
It's a story for another day.
You see, there's the East African, I was in the chamber. There's the East African community. We still have a major problem. You go to Arusha.
Correct.
And you go to Namanga. There's a major problem in our trade with Tanzania.
Correct.
The trucks are on the road. The leaders signed on to the AFCFTA in Kigali, but what is the reality today, so many years down the road? I mean, the president flagged off a truck yesterday. But the reality is, are we trading smoother with our countries? We went to Nigeria with President Kenyatta, and he was going to sign a special status agreement with Nigeria. Nigeria has a deficit of dairy products. Kenya has a surplus. Nigeria imports their dairy products from New Zealand. You can just calculate the distance from New Zealand to Nigeria, where we have a surplus here. So it was a natural fit for a bilateral trade agreement. But then the ECOWAS bloc wouldn't give Nigeria the mandate to do an SSA with Kenya that will allow for that trade to take place. So in terms of...
But I thought the AFCTA now...
I think we look at the...
But there's some regional blocks.
It's a regional block. Even here locally, it's the same story. I mean, I dealt with the Council of Governors and these collectives of counties. To be honest, they're not going anywhere. But let me narrow down to the 6 problems that I was talking about. One, we must address the national debt. Yeah, we must find a solution to that and find a quick fix to see that we actually get out of that situation where we have a burdensome debt that makes us unable to proceed. That is why exporters like Mheshimiwa here cannot be able to get dollars, because the government's going to pay for its national debt. Number 2 is public procurement. And again, I've been advocating that, like many more developed economies, let us have an official, allowable commission to be paid by enterprise. You see, in Kenya, if you look at the cost of public procurement, in very many parts of government, in very many departments of government, items are procured at 300% of the cost. 100, so out of the 300%, 100% ends up in, or 200% ends up in the pockets of the officials. So you'll find, and I'm not lying, I know I'll be criticized for this, but the reality is you'll find public officials, civil servants, with hundreds of millions of shillings that they cannot use because they didn't earn it officially correctly, and through legitimate means, they cannot create employment, so there's dead capital. Whereas people who are providing employment, people who are an enterprise, are burdened with all these issues and all these corruption and all these things they have to pay out. Even people who have their money stuck with county governments and national government. Today somebody will come and say, fine, you've got 20 million stuck. If you commit to give us 5, we'll get your money out. So if your bank breathing down your neck, Many times you say, fine, I'll take a loss, but let me pay this, commit to give this person the 5, so that I get my 20, so I can get the back of my bank, the bank off my back. So you see, you'll find a lot of debt capital sitting in the hands of officials because of public procurement. In America, I know many enterprises are allowed to give out 4%. There is allowable commission that can be claimed by the enterprise. So if I do business, and I say in my books, I've paid out a commission. Now I'm proposing that we have a 10% allowable commission that can be paid by enterprise. Well, you can actually pay that to facilitate for business. So we reduce the amount of money that it costs for you to do business. So if you're doing business with officials, or if, and they do it through legitimate purposes, then you can pay out a commission that is capped legitimately. That is also in the books of government, in the books of the company. And the third one, of course, is the recurrent expenditure. I mean, all these people we are paying for. Where is this money coming from?
Yeah, I think those are good points to really peg our thoughts on. Yes, you want to say something? Or
No,
let me come to Bill Okero just to weigh in on that. Then we orient the discussion now to Safaricom and Fuliza, the resumption of it, and the Hustler Fund now channeling through Fuliza. We talk of public procurement. I think we'll broach it also on that particular matter. But let's just run it up on this on that conversation, Bilo.
Well, there isn't much left, but my aim is always to mention this issue of leadership. Let me tell you, all these challenges you have in a country, it's all about leadership. Because if the leader leads by example, all these institutions will follow. But when a president calls a meeting for all the thousands of MCAs in the country, and because of political expediency says, you will be given this, you will be given this, you will be given that allowance, that car, this and that. Then I mean, so the challenge we have in this country is political expediency by the leadership all the time. And this is why everyone is asking for a piece of the pie in government. But if the leadership is really pained by what is going on in this country and really wants to do something, for example, now this government came in and said, we are concerned about the cost of living. The first thing that happened in the first 2 weeks, the last few days you've seen, is the inflation tax adjustment by KRA. Something which today you've seen a very nice speech by the CEO of Kenya's Association of Manufacturers. He says it's one of the most regressive, piece of legislation that is really a zero-sum game, because it's really working. It increases the cost of living. You're trying to, because he has employees, I have employees. They don't even get adjustment for inflation, the level that KRA is charging every year to tax.
But these adjustments is illegal. If you go to the Finance Act,
but I'm saying those are the things which, as a leader, you need to address. How do you address it? If you lead by example and say, I want to reduce the number of people working in the government, I want to reduce the government expenditure, I want to reduce the way the government, does procurement, address the issues of procurement and so forth. If you address all the challenges, really, and you lead by example, people will follow you. Today, for example, the new president, has a very good opportunity because he controls both houses of parliament, right? He has that goodwill. He can legislate, he can change some of the legislation, he can introduce things that today can be easily adopted. But if we go and say, look, political expediency, I want their support in 2027, so I must do this, we'll not go anywhere. We'll be talking about these same things 5 years from today. And that has been the problem that we have had. And so for me, really, the challenge in this country is about leadership, really. And it must start at the top. It's not about what MPs want, or what governors want. It's about what does the boss say. And these are the people who can, nations have been influenced by the leader. And so, really, I think when you have that opportunity, and I'm glad McPhee said the President Ruto is a doer. He needs to. The legacy that a leader wants is not about building highways. It's about changing the lives of the people. It's about changing the way they live, the way their culture, their ethics. You can change a lot of things fundamentally, so that, because the resources we have is huge, by the way. We're not poor. The taxes that we collect in this country is crazy. It's about how you utilize it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And it's the priorities. Let me give you an example of priorities. People are dying. in some of these counties. If you watch some of one of the channels last night, what's happening in Mandara, and the way children are severely malnourished and people are dying in many counties. But neither the president nor deputy sees it fit to go and visit any of these places. It's a priority. People are dying. You keep saying we shall not allow a Kenyan to die, but you can't go and visit. Kids who are dying in hospitals because they're severely malnourished. I mean, and you say I'm going to address it. So I think as leaders, really, they must take those priorities. And if we address our priorities, some of these things will not be there. I'm telling you.
I just wanted to get clarity before we go to the issue of Eliza, and I come to you, Dr. McPhee, because when you're talking about inflation, can you adjust inflation midway? Because looking at the Financial Act 2022 and excess duty as well, this is supposed to be done the beginning of the financial year. What we see being broached here on adjustment, can that be challenged in court?
Well, you see, the KRA can introduce, let's say, legislation can introduce a tax from any date at all. Okay, the president will give his assent, and in that particular case, in that particular bill, when it becomes an act, they will say the date on which this thing is going to take place is such and such a date. The thing that, you see, these inflation adjustments, to my mind, are absolutely wrong. And I'll tell you why. Let's suppose we just take the following. Let's suppose I'm going to buy a Tusker. And I'm going to buy it, sorry, Billo, but, I'm getting into alcohol here. But anyway, so, I used to drink...
Actually, 30 different items affected by the excess duty.
Yeah, but anyway, you see, let's suppose that, for example, this Tusker costs, let's say, 75 shillings to produce, and the tax is more or less 100% of that. It's not quite that, okay, but the price will go from 75 to 150. Now, if the price of producing the Tusker is going to be higher because more has got to be paid to the farmers, the cost of water is there, the cost of electricity is there, the cost of the transport is there, let's suppose that it goes from 75 to 85. Now, 100% of 85 is 85. The inflation has been 75 to 85. So in this case here, the tax will automatically go up by the same amount. So this inflation adjustment, to my mind, it is totally wrong. It's because what KRA is doing is, we're pricing ourselves out of the market. You go to our border with Uganda. If you want to drink a beer in Busia, you don't drink it in Kenya. You go across the border and drink it at Tusker, made in Kenya. As Kipono was saying, made in Kenya. You go to Uganda to drink it because it's cheaper in Uganda than in Kenya.